Hey everybody, quick intro to today's episode with Ross Edgley because we jumped straight into a conversation because we were literally talking off air and I paused Ross and said, you know what, I'm just going to press record because that went down so well last time because it was just very conversational because these are the conversations that me and Ross have anytime we catch up. So instead of doing a traditional introduction and explaining who Ross is, we went straight into conversation on this one. So Ross Edgley is the author of the new book, The World's Fittest Book, which we've talked about a lot in today's podcast. Some of you know him from the first episode. He is only the second person to feature twice on the Keane Fitness podcast. He's better known for his ridiculous fitness stunts like running a marathon, pulling a 1.4 ton Land Rover, for doing triathlons with logs and trees attached to his body, and more recently doing a 40-kilometer swim with a log attached, which actually turned into a 100-kilometer swim across the Caribbean. So I hope you enjoy this week's episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Ross is just one of my favorite people on the planet. He's an incredible personality. He's a wealth of information and knowledge on nutrition, fitness, and just life in general. So I hope you enjoy this week's episode, and we'll catch up with you all on the other side.
You're listening to the Keane Fitness Podcast, where Irish fitness entrepreneur Keane answers your questions and interviews leaders in the world of fitness, health, mindset, and natural wellness. Come join the fun.
Hey everybody, going to do a little bit of a different introduction today because I have a feeling that anytime I talk to Ross, the conversations are always different. So normally I have this is the Keane Fitness Podcast. I'll do a separate introduction, I think, and just talk about Ross's book and everything that he's doing. But we're about to get into a conversation, and the feedback from the last episode was incredible because, Ross, you're one of my favorite people on the fucking planet. so excited to have you back on. But yeah, we were just having a conversation there. How's everything been since I was fucking chatting to you last?
Good, but no. I need to ask you, and that's why we've done this. We've not done it. So this is the first time we spoke since you decided to just go and crush the Marathon des Sables. So many questions. Only because, it was 7 months ago now when me and you did the Canterbury Rugby Fit campaign, and you sort of said to me, and you were hench at the time, and I remember I was like, what's on the agenda next year? And you said, Marathon des Sables. And I was like, what? I was like, people do that. They are lean. They train in the desert. They're 60 kilos. They train in the desert. More, and I said this on my Instagram story when you were doing it, but I'm so crazy proud of you because you said you were going to do it. You then go back to Ireland where it's not exactly renowned for its deserts or hot weather.
That is not. Yeah.
I mean, you were about 20 kilos heavier, and that's a dense, because, me and you aren't the tallest of gentlemen.
No, so that we're not. We're very vertically challenged, my friend. And the two of us are in that boat.
So, this is crazy. Not only that you did it, not only under those conditions, but you were carrying about 20 kilos more muscle mass than most guys. Yeah. That's good. So what is it what you were talking about your feet then? Can you say, does this need a sort of PG rating?
People listen to my podcast know that we don't filter anything. I think that's why people fucking love having you on. They're like, you need to get Ross back on the podcast. I was like, fucking right I do. But I was about 20 kilos heavier than nearly everybody there. Everyone else that was in my tent. There was one other guy who was the same weight as me, but he was 6'7". So there was a little bit of a difference there because I'm 5'8". So he was about 84 kilos as well. And I was there. I didn't lose any weight in the preparation. I was running 50 to 100 kilometers a week consistently. And I didn't lose any weight. But my feet got fucking mangled. Just because it's the heat and your feet are swelling, and I had a 15 kilo backpack. So I had
more food as well.
I had more food, and that was the thing with most of the guys, people in my tent, and a couple of the other Moroccans and really elite runners. They were running with 6 kilos in their backpack, and I had just under 15 without water. So then you add water, it's another 2-3 kilos.
Why were you taking? You were taking some Christmas dinner. That is amazing. So not only were you heavy, but obviously you had to fuel it, so you took more as well.
Yeah.
That is nuts. And was food okay out there? I mean, I'm always fascinated in terms of like your digestion. Like, how were you eating and then running on the go?
That was something that I probably didn't, because I've never obviously run. I ran my first marathon to prepare for this. I ran the marathon in Dubai. I was chatting to you over there. I ran that with a backpack and a hoodie, and that was my first ever marathon. I'd never run that distance before. So I wasn't really used to, because I ran that without any food. I just literally ran straight through. I didn't know any different. I was like, oh, I'll get water, I'll be fine. And then I ate after, not realizing that, because I'd never done endurance events, and I was like, oh, I'll be fine for, 3.5 hours, 4 hours, I'll be fine. But during Marathon des Sables, you're obviously out. Like the long day, the 86 kilometer, the double marathon took me nearly 24 hours. And you're eating on the go. So that was something I wasn't great with. I had almond butter and I had chia seed gels and stuff like that, and they worked fine. But I was the only person on the Friday, the last day, whose bag was still fucking full, because I was taking food off people that were chucking their food. So everyone on the Friday, on the last day, the last marathon, were there putting their sleeping bag and everything into the bag. And I was there, everything still strapped on, because my bag was full, because I had taken food from people that were chucking it, because I was starving out there. So, but yeah.
Set a record across. You must have set a record for like most food consumed across the marathon.
Yeah.
Just backtracking ever so slightly. So when you did your first marathon out in Dubai, and I wanted to ask you this. I'm glad we're doing this rather than chatting off air. But do you find, because this is something with Joe Rogan and CT Fletcher, and they were talking about bigger athletes not being very good at endurance.
Yeah.
And I was like, absolutely, if you have a genetic predisposition to be good at strength, you are carrying more weight, more muscle mass, absolutely. But I was like, but just consider this as a counter argument. If you have more muscle mass, you are able to store more muscle glycogen.
Yeah.
So granted, with something like running, where absolutely power to weight ratio is critical, I was saying for myself, with my 100-kilometer swim, I found that I wasn't limited by gravity. So my power to weight ratio didn't matter as much.
Yeah.
Granted, I'm an odd shape going through the water, but I actually found that when I was training with a lot of friends who were Ironman athletes, they were having to refuel because they didn't have the muscle glycogen, so they didn't have that storage capacity. Yeah. So what I love is you kind of naively just challenge like sports science. So do you find that because you are quite heavily muscle bound, you didn't have to refeed, so you had that storage capacity?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because even the beauty of training for this even was I learned a lot about my own body. Well, I don't need to eat during an event. I can do something for 4 or 5 hours as long as I fueled before and I fueled after. You're storing up that muscle glycogen. You're pulling from that. So I have energy. My energy doesn't slump. And I did the Dubai Marathon straight through. I didn't eat anything on that. I was perfect. But I had eaten the day before and I had a breakfast. So I was fine. I ran straight through that. I drank water. And I wasn't, I was so fucking naive, Ross. Like I was there and I saw these guys with like all their gels stuck to them. And I'm like, oh shit, I should have brought some gels or some food or something. But I never ran a marathon, like a full marathon. So I didn't know. And there was like a load of elite people in Dubai trying to like hit their PB and fucking crack 3 hours. And I'm like, oh shit, I should have done that. How did you find the 100-kilometer swim? Did you find yourself similar that you were? That's a curious one. Tell people, because we talked about it briefly, but for those that missed the first episode, talk us through the most recent swim that you did.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I suppose like this is one thing that kind of bonds me and you in that we naively go into these things and I think there's something to be said. I think, too many people kind of get paralyzed by over-analysis and they say, do I need this energel? Do I need this? And it's like, do you know what? Just get out there and do it. Like the body is incredibly durable. Yeah. And I think you're a living testament to that, where you just said, yeah, Marathon des Sables, that's tough, right? And I'm like, yeah, pretty tough. Do that then. So I think that's what I would love your listeners to take away, that, your body is so much more durable and more capable than you probably think it is. And I think too often, a lot of companies want to market intra-workouts, energels. Of course they do. They want you to buy them. Whereas in reality, you're almost like the anti-poster boy to energels. And you're just going, you don't need them. You can do a marathon without. So basically I just realised we've not caught up since then. So last time we spoke, I was planning to swim from Martinique to St. Lucia, which is 40 kilometres, pulling a 100-pound tree.
Yeah.
So for those who followed it or who haven't, basically it didn't go to plan. What happened is, because the tides and the currents were so bad, I ended up swimming over 100 kilometres for over 32 hours, and I still couldn't touch the beach.
Jesus. I remember following it and I was like, oh my God. Superhuman is the term that comes to mind when I fucking see some of this shit you do.
Super stupid. But I think what was great is it really did, what was nice is the brief of the whole thing was just like, hey, let's see where the limits of the human body lie. And I think, ironically, if I had just done the 40 kilometers, I'd have been like, oh yeah, that was pretty tough. So by just like being pushed all over from the Caribbean side to the Atlantic side, to be lost at sea, to be getting stung by jellyfish, swimming at night. I mean, there was a period as well. I mean, this wasn't really shown on the documentary, but the captain shouts from the boat and he was like, Ross, you're in a really bad current. You've got to swim hard. I was swimming at about 3 knots, but I had 3 knots pushing me back, which basically meant I was just static, swimming, but like on
weren't getting anywhere. Yeah.
And he was like, so you got to swim hard, Ross. And I was like, all right, noted, no worries. So I put my head down and I set my watch and I was like, I'm going to swim hard for, 3 hours. 3 hours I could probably crank out, 10, 20K, depending, so right, that's got to get me out of the current. So I put my head down and swam and I popped my head up 3 hours later and I went, how are we doing? And he couldn't look me in the eye and he just went, you've not moved. You've been in the same spot for 3 hours. And I obviously won't say what I actually said. My language is quite colourful. But it was just amazing how looking at feeding strategies very similar to you. I think too often, we overcomplicate our nutrition. And I think also being out there, probably very similar to you, you start to become an expert in your own nutrition, but not in the sense of reading, journals and the latest studies. It's nutrigenomics, how your nutrition interacts with your own individual genetics. Yeah. And that's going to be so different from person to person. There'll be, I guarantee when you were running, if you're there saying, oh, do you want some almond butter? Someone who's maybe more, you're fat adapted, you do very well on that. So someone who's more carb adapted will be like, no, give me an energy. I'll keep your nut butter when you're nailing it. Or the advice that you give to someone, if you turned around to, someone who's like a 60-kilo marathon runner, energy pathways, very well trained, but doesn't hold muscle glycogen because they don't have that muscle mass. And you were there going, honestly, you don't have the carb load, just go and like crush it without. That is terrible advice for them.
Yeah.
It works. And I think that's one thing as well, that what I thought I would want going across the Caribbean Sea, in the end, I was like yelling at the boat, just going like, guys, what have we got? And they were saying, pancakes, jelly babies. And I was like, yeah, get the jelly babies and wrap them in a pancake. Just give that to me. So like my taste buds, because of the salt water, was like, and I think, again, it would be amazing for all your listeners to take that away, know that like a lot of sort of journals, a lot of articles that they probably read, at the end of the day, you're your own expert. And that's certainly one of the things with the world's fittest book, that it's trying to create an army of experts, not followers. So everyone, you don't have to be Brian Keane and do a marathon to Southland on no food or loads of food. You don't have to do that. But to take away, I think, the points that you brilliantly made, and it did so well on social media. And that's why I was buzzing for you, because I know that you practice what you preach. And to see that and even afterwards, when you took that selfie in the hotel, you were just like, yeah, still the same. And that's amazing as well, looking at, this idea that strength and stamina cannot coexist. Yeah. Robert Hicks in 1980s looked at concurrent training, and you just disproved that. And that was awesome. Like I said, as a friend and a follower, I loved watching it.
Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by CleanCookedMeals. I'm really excited to bring CleanCookedMeals on as a sponsor of the podcast because I know there's a lot of you listening that have such busy lifestyles and can struggle to prioritize the time to cook nutritious and tasty food. And CleanCookedMeals were the meal prep service I used for the lead up to Marathon des Sables, the 250 kilometer self-sufficient run through the Sahara Desert last month. And a lot of you following my journey on Instagram would have seen them tagged in Instagram stories. So I wanted to bring them on as a sponsor of the podcast because they provided me with so much value, even so much since I've got back because of all my speaking appearances and the different business ventures that I'm in at the minute. I've been struggling myself to prioritize cooking meals, so I've been using them since I've got back because if you're looking to just stay on track and you want the time saved from shopping, prepping, cooking your meals, I just can't recommend them enough. Their food is awesome. I love the taste. They'll fit it to whatever your goals are, so you can check out their website, www.cleancookedmeals.ie. You can check the foods on there. You can make your order. And if you have any questions, you can send the guys an email at info@cleancookedmeals.ie. So definitely go check them out, www.cleancookedmeals.ie. If you're looking for a meal prep service, this is the one I use and cannot recommend them enough. So I hope you enjoy today's episode brought to you by CleanCookedMeals. So talking on that, Ross, tell us about your new book. Before you get into it, I'm so fucking excited about this book. Not only have you sent me a copy of it, I've ordered my own copy because I'm like, whichever one gets here first. Like, I'm like, I can't wait to read this book. It's going to be freaking awesome. Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, bro, you're a legend, mate. Yeah, so it's been 10 years of sort of training and writing and lots of recipes. That was some of the best bit, trialing them. But yeah, 10 years basically. So 10 years ago now, I graduated from Loughborough University. Started writing the book that kind of was just my training and travel journal, and then it just started to evolve. I think, so the title, The World's Fittest Book, probably worth mentioning first off. It's
the best title of a book ever, by the way. Like, even in isolation, I know why it's called that, but in isolation, I'm like, I was like, if I didn't know who you were, that fucking book title would have caught me. I'm like, I wonder who this guy is. Like, tell us about it. Why The World's Fittest Book?
Yeah, so it's a bold title, and I always feel like, I have to stress it's more a testament to the Olympic champions, world record holders, celebrated military personnel, leading chefs and nutritionists, all of these people who you read about within the book. It compiles their teachings, and it's much more a testament to them. Linford Christie, 100-meter Olympic champion, Andy Bolton, first man to deadlift 1,000 pounds, Jeff Capes, two-time world's strongest man, the Sam Bushman of Africa, the Yamabushi monks of Japan. It's really compiling all of their teachings. It's not me just going, yeah, I'm the world's fittest author,
Which you could do. Like, let's be fair. There's about maybe 3 people on the planet that could claim that, and you'd be like, yeah, I'll buy that. You're fucking one of them, so...
No, so this is it, and I always say with Michael Foucault, who was a famous French theologian, he said, I'm no guru. My job is to make windows where there were once walls. And so that's definitely with this book. It's like I'm just purely the one who ran around with a pen, collating all of the teachings of everyone else. But yeah, it kind of how it existed is, I suppose, very similar to how me and you started throwing around ideas and philosophies around fitness and food. In that, when I was first strength training, I was training under Andy Bolton, so 7-time world powerlifting champion, and I realized that a lot of his training, although obviously being very strength-based, it was during some of his training up in Raoul's gym in Leeds that I noticed. And for any of the listeners, if you do go on YouTube and just search Andy Bolton 1,000-pound deadlift, you'll notice that as he gets down and he grips the bar, he performs essentially like 3 knee bends. So what he's doing right there is, a lot of people say, is he bouncing? Is he storing that kinetic energy in his legs? But it's a speed training principle that was pioneered in the Soviet Union by Verkhoshansky, who's one of the greatest strength and conditioning coaches to ever live. And Verkhoshansky came up with this idea of the depth jump. The depth jump is just if me and you, Brian, were down the gym and I was like, right, box jumps. And me and you busted out our box jumps. what he found, Verkhoshansky found, was by having somebody drop from an elevated platform, land, there's an eccentric contraction in the legs as the muscles are in tension, but they're lengthening. You then store that kinetic energy, that elasticity, and then he found the concentric contraction, so the actual jump itself, is more powerful. Basically, by jumping from one box and then landing and then springing up, you are able to jump higher. You're able to generate more force. And that was Verkhoshansky, like way back in the 1980s, 1990s, pioneering speed training, velocity training. And watching Andy Bolton, I was like, well, hang on. So are you speed training right now or strength training? Because you're kind of blurring the lines between the two. And although we're often told, I am a strength athlete, I'm a speed athlete, it's like, well, no, your body doesn't understand that. The lines are completely blurred. And so then I started writing about how the two interact. And then I was at Brunel University and I was speed training with Linford Christie, and I noticed that Linford is repping like 150, 160 on a bench press, like 150 kilos for reps. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, and even now, I mean, he's a lot older now and he's still strong. So I'm like, so well, hang on, are you a strength athlete? Are you a speed athlete? And it just became so clear that the lines were blurring. And just finally, to touch upon, endurance as well. Running is essentially a body weight exercise. You're putting 3 times your own body weight through each foot. And certainly when you're going down crazy sand dunes, 95 kilos in the Marathon des Sables, and it's Brian Keane. You need such strength in each one of your foot. It's like a eccentric pistol squat, down sand dunes. You better hope you've got strong legs and you've got a good power to weight ratio. So then all of a sudden, are you a strength athlete? Are you a speed athlete? Are you a more endurance based? And again, the lines became blurred. So for me, the World's Fittest book was about compiling all of the teachings, but seeing how they all interact so you can create this kind of perfect human, from the ground up, basically.
I love it. And that's why I connect so much with your stuff, Ross, even before, we were friends and before, I've been following your journey for ages. Since you did the fucking car, that was a 1.4 ton marathon pulling the Land Rover. Like, I've been following since then. And when I think of you, I think of that connection where you can be strong, you can be fit, you can be athletic, you can literally have the perfect amount of everything. And you kind of break those barriers, because what we do sometimes in fitness, and again, I was a victim of this, it's like, well, I'm a strength athlete, or I'm a bodybuilder and I have muscle, or I'm a marathon runner and I'm fit and I have endurance, where you combining the whole thing. So it's so awesome to see a book that talks through that. And I'm so fucking excited to read it. Like,
do you know what, Brian? It's exactly that. Like, so you are a great example. You're almost the embodiment of the book, that when you were standing on the start line of the Marathon des Sables, well, people would have gone, are you lost? Like, that. They'll be like, the gym's that way, mate. And you would just... Because, and this is one thing, he's one of my favorite authors, Nassim Taleb, nothing to do with fitness. He's a famous economist. And in one of his books, my favorite quote is, as humans facing limited knowledge, always resort to prescribed ideas and narratives. And what I mean by that in terms of fitness is, so often we have limited knowledge, so we resort to these prescribed ideas. So if somebody doesn't have a full understanding of how the human body works, they will look at Brian Keane on the start line of the Marathon des Sables and think, oh no, this doesn't make sense. Like, I need to put him in a pigeonhole. Like, is he a bodybuilder? Yes, he's a bodybuilder. He's just lost. Makes them feel better and go, yes, that's how he's big, so he's a bodybuilder. He shouldn't be here. And I love that you're like, well, no, we're all human, and way back in the day, I'm talking like our ancestors here, there was no distinction because you were fit for purpose. Your body was functional for what it needed to be. And again, that's what I love what you did, because you were just saying, the body is so much more powerful than we're often led to believe, and stop trying to put your body and other bodies into pigeonholes, because you can ultimately be whatever you want and use, if you systematically know how to program your body. And I think that's one thing that the book does so well for strength, speed, stamina, fat loss. There's always a systematic way to approach those goals. There's nothing almost revolutionary in the book. These are laws of biology that we've known for, thousands of years. If anything, the book is just one of the first to put it into a cohesive conceptual framework to kind of go, okay, today I want to lose, fat. This month I want to lose fat. And it's like, okay, cool. Then this is systematically how you can go about that. I think too often people will, sort of blindly with no clear direction go about their goals that also change, every single month. And that's what's great about the book. It should be something that people always come back to as like I use the term like a literary buffet. So you can just pick and choose like little bits which you want, and it's not just something you have to read from cover to cover. So yeah.
I love that. And that concept is such a genius. There's genius in simplicity, but again, there's nothing simple about the idea of combining it and everything that you've done. That's what makes it, you've just put it in an amazingly easy to understand and cohesive way to read. But the genius of the fact that people month by month or week by week will change what it is we're trying to achieve. Some weeks you're like, I want to build a little bit of muscle. Or another month you want to be a little bit more functional. Or another month you're like, I need to lose a little bit of body fat. I love that that's how you took the training section of the book, and it's how you took the angle of the book, because it just provides so much value. And I'm going to say this probably 10 times before the end of the episode, but I'll be linking it up in the show notes. If you haven't ordered this book already, or you haven't got it, you need to do that right now. I literally, the day it came up on Amazon, I pre-ordered it, and you were like, I fucking saved you a copy. I'm sending you a copy. I'm like, but I'm going to get my other one as well. I'm going to give it to somebody if I have to, because so many people are going to benefit from reading this.
Oh, bro, thank you. That's exactly it as well. I think what will be amazing is once people have read the book. So again, another huge influence on the book was Ralph Waldo Emerson. So famous American. Yeah, and I mean, we spoke about this all last year, where we were saying one of my favorite quotes is if you teach a man principles, he can create his own methods. And what I mean by that is the industry is just riddled with so many methods. So let's take building muscle mass, because a lot of listeners will probably go, yeah, I want to build muscle this year. And it's like, okay, when people start saying, well, what should I do? German volume training? Should I do 5x5? Should it be more powerlifting centric or bodybuilding centric? I'm like, well, what you're doing there is you're talking about methods. But if you understand principles, you can create your own method. So the principles of muscular hypertrophy, how do you increase muscle mass? Well, there's three ways. There is mechanical tension. So that is powerlifting. That is basically, in real layman's terms, just lift heavy weights. There's metabolic stress. So that's more your bodybuilding centric work. So it doesn't matter if it's Dorian Yates, Mike Mentzer, crazy drop sets, supersets, where you are, again, in layman's terms, just chasing a pump. You're just going to get a crazy pump. And then you've got muscle damage, which is looking at eccentric work. So, for instance, if you wanted to increase the size of your chest, and you're sort of concerned with that, nice wide grip on the bench press, eccentric contraction. So you're lowering the weight as slow as possible, really heavy weight, and your partner lifts it off for you. Something that you shouldn't use all the time because of the amount of stress it puts on your central nervous system and your body's ability to recover from it. But it's a useful tool. So those three principles there are principles. So then it doesn't matter what method. It's like, are we doing German volume training? Are we doing, Mike Mentzer's HIIT training? Are we doing? And so it doesn't matter. And what's going to be so great once people have read the book is you can have that conversation with people in the, whether it's your training partner, your friend, down the gym, it doesn't matter. You can say, what should we do today? It's like, well, I'm training for hypertrophy this month. So I'm going to start with mechanical tension. So I'm going to start with a powerlifting, type. Let's use, I want someone who's trying to increase the size of their chest. It's like, okay, cool. Then we can look at mechanical tension. So like 5x5, big bench press. We're going to go heavy, but then we're going to work down. We're going to look at more metabolic stress. We're going to do some horrible dumbbell flies, supersetted into like cable crossovers. Do you see what I mean? And then we're going to finish up with muscle damage. But you can have those conversations and you almost become capable of writing your own plans. And what's so nice is it's probably even more useful because people are saying, oh, I'm not an elite athlete. I don't want to, run around with a car on my back or like climb a rope. And I'm going, well, no. Like, I don't recommend that to most people, but it's an extreme example But what's nice is even like a father of 3 or, a teenage girl who just wants to get into training, or a young guy, it doesn't matter, because they're going to have busy schedules. Equipping them with the knowledge needed, they can just juggle their own workouts and their own schedule because they're capable. But I think too many people blindly follow methods. And if something goes wrong, like they miss a day, they can't train that day, they'll go, oh God, like what should I do? Should I start on day 1 of the program? Should I go? It's like, it doesn't matter. If you know what you're doing, you can change it round to fit with you, basically.
I love it. And I love what you touched on as well there, that sometimes when we talk about the different types of training, the hypertrophy, the metabolic stress, things like that, sometimes it can get pigeonholed into just being for guys. And I know we've about half and half listeners, guys and girls on the podcast. The same method and messages for females. Obviously there's different hormonal things going on, but it's the same principle. So if you're a girl or a female listening to this, the same message rings true. So the book, Ross, will girls get as much from it as guys? And
that's a brilliant point, Brian. Yeah, I had a few. So it's the same on my social media. Like so many, girls were saying, "Is this applicable to me as well?" And it's like, absolutely. And I think one of the best things about this is chatting to people like Ashley Horner, actually, who I'll introduce you, Brian. You need to get her on the podcast. She's amazing. So she ran across Haiti. Don't quote me on this. It was something like 293 miles in 3 days. She's incredible. And she did it to raise money for an orphanage out there. She's amazing. And I think people like her, Caroline Pierce, who was GB heptathlete, friends of mine like that, they are so well educated. They know that there's not a female version of a bench press. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like this is the female squat. This is the squat you do if you're a lady. It's like, no.
But that's how it is in fitness. So I'm laughing because sometimes, and it's so simple that wherever it gets lost in translation, you're like, oh, well, this is how you squat if you're a female, this is how you squat if you're a male. And as you said, we're all humans. So I didn't mean to jump in on the point. It's just something that I'm sure came into people's minds there, because it's something that is a huge misconception in parts of the fitness industry. Sorry, continue.
Right. I mean, and within the book, yes, when you start looking at the laws of thermodynamics, calories in versus calories out, if you are looking at calculating your calories for that day, we show you how to create your own diet plan. And if you are using things like the Harrison-Benedict formula or anything like that to look at your calories for the day, yes, there might be a distinction, or there is a distinction between, males and females there. So you can start to make those generalizations there. And we do within the book. So we say, within this calculation, if you are female, if you are male, use this equation or use this one. But other than that, you are so right. And I think what's so interesting as well, we have a user guide within the book, and that's one of the first few pages, and it says this is a user guide for your body, and it's a systematic way of how to build your body from the ground up. A good example, and I always use this, is it begins with the law of body basics, which is based on Soviet Union sporting principles. If we were growing up and I was a coach in the Soviet Union and I was handed a young Keane, Brian Keane, and they would go, there you go, train him. I'm like, okay, I don't know if he's going to be tall, small, quick. I don't know if he's going to be good at endurance. I don't know if he's going to be good at racket. But I don't know. So all I can do is, and this was basically a system known as the process of achieving sports mastery. All I can do is I can take young Brian Keane and I can look at body weight workout, light plyometric work, calisthenics, body weight. It doesn't matter what you want to call it. General physical preparedness, as they called it. It doesn't matter. But there's these big natural movement patterns. You lunge, bear crawl, climb, hang. All of these big movement patterns that are very general. So you build a neurological foundation. So you can later specialize. So you understand proprioception, how your body and your joints work cohesively together. And then later, when young Brian Keane starts to fill out and we go, oh God, he's pretty stacked, we can go, right, okay, maybe we put him into strength-based sport. But because of the neurological foundation, you are able to understand how to move your body during a squat, bench, or deadlift, or whatever sport you later specialize in. And when I was talking about this before, there was a few girls who were listening, and they sort of said, yeah, but is this applicable to me? because like I don't want to be a Soviet Union sporting specimen. And I'm like, well, no, I would argue even more so, because even if your goal is aesthetics, if you learn to have this, we call it the law of body basics within the book, if you build this neurological foundation, you're building your body from the ground up. So even if your goal is just to look good and as aesthetics, when you look at the body, you'll be like, right, everything is in proportion. Everything is trained how it should look. It's like the guy who only trains arms and has no legs. You know, well, it's at the moment, I think there's a huge trend in the female industry into to have their, a big glutes, so they're just working on their glutes all the time. And it's like, there's absolutely, but there is something a little bit wrong. The same way if you look at a guy with massive arms but like no legs, you're like, something's not right there aesthetically. And it will be the same if a girl just solely just hammers glutes, then you'll be like, but there's no hamstring quad development. So even if your goal is aesthetics, you'll look and go, something's not quite right, from an aesthetic and functional human point of view. That makes sense. So it was a good point that the book was written, like I said, from that sports performance background, but it quickly also identified aesthetics as well.
But they're I think intrinsically linked. Like it's something that, again, it comes back to that pigeonholing, that we think that, right, well, I want bigger glutes, so I'm just going to train glutes, or I want bigger arms, I'm just going to train arms. But there's all these other things going on in your body from training other body parts. Like one of the things I tell younger guys, particularly the 15, 16-year-olds that are in training, biceps one day, triceps another day, and then maybe chest. I'm like, do you know what? If you hit a couple of squats with perfect form, you're going to get some naturally elevated growth hormone. You're going to get all these other physiological benefits that is probably going to enhance your arm and chest as well. And sometimes we put the body together and think that, right, I just want to build my glutes, I'm going to train glutes, or I want to build my arms, I'm just going to train arms. I love the angle you came with, that it's all nearly intrinsically linked. By all means, prioritize what you're trying to, aesthetically make more pleasing. Or if you're making yourself stronger and a fitter athlete, you want to throw in your body composition work in there as well, so that you can look a certain way. But it's not in isolation. And I love that that's how you're bringing the book together and showing people how to do it themselves.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. Even looking at the history of bodybuilding, which is obviously a purely aesthetic sport, but when you look at Eugene Sandow, so the father of bodybuilding, for those again listening, if you just quickly Google him, you'll probably be like, oh, that's him, because his image is quite famous. But Eugene Sandow, he was a famous European strongman, so his routine was all about functionality, and he would had a crazy like single arm snatch, and he would bend bars, those sort of like old circus acts. He was a strong man in the true sense of the word. However, posing sort of became part of his routine because he needed a bit of a breather between these crazy single arm snatches. He was like, oh, I can't keep doing this and making the crowd cheer, so I'll show them my biceps in between. And so he started doing that, and that essentially became bodybuilding. However, like Eugene Sandow, if you've ever read any of his, so he's written a few books, and it's written in kind of like ye olde English, for want of a better term. And a lot of what he talks about is so applicable today. Like he was a pure, like sort of critically thinking about his body, the same way with the world's fittest book. Eugene Sandow, so this is like hundreds of years ago. And I'm going to sort of butcher it, so I'm going to apologize to everyone listening now. But there's a part in there where he's talking in ye olde English, and he's saying, I am often asked when thy best time to train is.
You're old. I love it. You're old style English. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's just incredible.
I apologize to Eugene Sandow listeners and fans everywhere. But one thing he said, and he said, but do you know what? And he then went off on one saying, if thy body works grander in thy morning, then so be it. However, oft it's said that your body is warmer in the evening. And he goes off on one. And that was awful, I'm sorry. But what's interesting is he was describing your circadian rhythm. So your body's 24-hour biological clock that we now know that at certain periods, yes, there are arguments objectively looking that testosterone is higher in the morning, but so is cortisol levels, your body's stress hormone. And there is an argument that towards the evening, that testosterone to cortisol ratio is more favorable to training. There's also the argument that your body is warmer, in inverted commas, in the evening, so therefore you're better able to perform strength training. However, you caveat, and sports science has since caveated all of that with, do you know what? Everyone's individual. So it doesn't matter if you think you work out better in the morning, then do it. And if you do it in the evening, then do it. And now we've applied, taxonomy, and we understand hormones a little bit better. But that doesn't mean that what Eugene Sandow was describing was any less wrong. He was absolutely right, and he intuitively understood it. And although strange people like me try and do sort of, accents and you sort of like butcher what he said, he was absolutely right. And I think that's what's key. We've known it for so long, and he was doing it back then, and it's just kind of making it a little bit clearer today, and we understand it a little bit better, but so did he. Yeah,
I love it. And then talk about the nutrition. It's obviously broken into different sections. What angle did you come at from the nutrition and diet, and what kind of role, or how did you go about writing that and presenting that?
So the nutrition was quite hard, obviously, because fitness and food is synonymous. So you can't impact one without impacting the other. So 100%. Throughout the book, we have recipes like during the World's Strongest Marathon, what recipes I was using for that. But there's an entire chapter that is just devoted to fat loss. And for me, it was so important to systematically give a way people to understand this thing called diets, because there's a statistic within the book based on, it's a fairly recent study, it was a meta-study, so again, study of thousands of studies, and they were looking at 90% of diets fail. And it's just like, well then why is no one addressing, like why are we so bad at dieting? Something's not right. And within the book we say, the food isn't the issue, our relationship with food is. And so at the very first, we have in each chapter what's called a pyramid of priority. So if you can imagine there's a pyramid, and it's this hierarchical way to run the body or achieve a goal. And at the base of the pyramid, you have to achieve that before you can go any higher. So at the very bottom of this fat loss pyramid of priority, we look at behavioral science. So adherence. I know we talked about this in the last podcast, but International Journal of Obesity 2008 looked at a meta-study, study of thousands of studies to discover the best diet. And, as you can imagine, everyone was on tenterhooks, and they were like, what is it? Is it Atkins? Is it South Beach? Is it Keane? They were like, what is it? And at the end, and I quote, they just said that weight loss was highest in those most adherent. Basically, the diet didn't matter, sticking to it did. Yeah. And I think for everybody listening, it's just kind of like, if I handed you a diet and was like, that is the best diet, you need to follow that. And you picked it up and you went, but I don't like rice, and the whole meal was rice, then that's doomed to fail. So the absolute base of the pyramid is like, it has to be sustainable, achievable, something you can adhere to. As you move up that pyramid of priority, absolutely, laws of thermodynamics, calories in versus calories out, you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. And I think too often now, we are marketed magic pills and cleansing diets, and it's like, no, do you know what, the World's Fittest book is just saying, like, that's absolute, I was going to swear then, and I realised, but you can swear on this.
You can swear, you can swear on my podcast.
But it's wrong, and it's just like, the laws of thermodynamics. You have to be in a calorie deficit. So there was the quite famous, the Twinkie diet. There was a professor who went on solely a Twinkie-based diet. That's all he had. And he actually found that he was able to lose weight. Now, a lot of people go, brilliant, so I can just go on Twinkies. And And it's like, well, no, but I don't know. I would question how sustainable a Twinkie diet is, but it does highlight the point that if you're in a calorie deficit, yes, you will lose weight. As you move up, you start to look at your macronutrients, protein, fats, and carbs, micronutrients, and you're moving up the pyramid. Sleep, the way that training interacts with that, obviously to help achieve a calorie deficit. And again, I think too often people are saying, you know, what's best? I want to lose weight. So is a weights best or is cardio best? Interval training. I've heard a lot about that, Ross. Which one's the best? And it's like, which one's best? Whichever one helps you achieve a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
If you're not training for strength, speed, stamina, or anything else, and your sole goal is fat loss, then the best form of exercise is the one that you can sustain, and it will help you achieve calorie deficit. So again, it just puts it in such, like I said, layman's terms, but a really easy way to understand within this pyramid of priority. And then as you start looking up the pyramid of priority, at the very top, there is things like alcohol, red wine, looking at resveratrol, you know, and as a chemical, or a natural chemical compound within red wine, that has kind of been the study basic. I don't want to give too much away on this particular one, but it's like it's become the focal point of so many studies at the moment, and what they're finding out about it is incredible. The same way with dark chocolate as well. So for so long, you know, chocolate, the modern definition of chocolate is seen as bad, you know, but yeah, the modern definition or the modern version of chocolate is that's layered in caramel, fudge, and sugar, low in cocoa. Whereas as the Mayan people used to understand cocoa and chocolate, they used to believe it was such a sacred food. Yeah. You know, cocoa is, you know, their definition of chocolate, it's high in flavonols, so improve insulin sensitivity, cognitive functioning. And it's like, yeah, we need to get back to that definition of chocolate. So that's at the very top of the pyramid of priority. And quite often people will look at that and go, hang on, wait, red wine, chocolate? And it's like, yeah, no.
Tell me more.
Exactly. It's like, but yeah, absolutely. But the rest of your pyramid has to be in order. You can't just jump straight to, like, you know, red wine and chocolate and be like, yes, world's fittest book.
Yeah, hold on. As soon as I get the book, I'm jumping straight to that section. I'm like, what did he say? How much wine can I have?
It's exactly. So that's what's so nice. And again, what's going to be amazing is it's going to be liberating, I hope, for most people who read it, that they'll go, you know, oh, wow, now I can have that conversation with, you know, myself, with my friends, with my personal trainer, with my nutritionist. I think, you know, nutritionists and personal trainers are absolutely valuable, but you should be able to have a conversation with them where if a nutritionist hands you a diet plan, you should be able to say, you know, oh, well, you know, looking at adherence, I don't believe I'll be able to stick to that. And you know, it's too often I think nutritionists have a slight messiah complex, and they might say, no, that's the diet, you have to stick to it. And it's like, well, that's doomed to fail. Yeah. And it gets to what I hope with the book, the same way with personal trainers, that they'll be able to turn around and just say, you know, why am I doing this? You know, if the goal is, you know, I'm trying to think of an example. I'm not going to call out anyone or badmouth anyone, but I remember I saw not too long ago on Instagram a coach, and he was basically making people do their plyometric box work towards the end of their workout. And I'm just like, well, plyometrics, your body's ability to generate force rapidly, speed work, and you have them performing them fatigued at the end of it. You know, so that athlete should have been clued up enough and knowledge enough just to say, hang on, why are we performing our speed work when I'm tired? You know, that makes no sense. And so that's what I hope the book does. Again, it creates an army of experts, not followers. So.
That's key, though. It's being able to just ask those questions. And that's what I love about what you just said there with your nutritionist or your personal trainer, that you're able to have that conversation because you have an idea of what works for you. And generally, I've always found with anyone I've ever worked with, and I'm sure it's similar in your experience, that the people that kind of you end up meeting halfway, because we all have kind of personal preferences that we're like, well, you know, some people like carb cycling, some people like whatever it is, ketogenic diet, or just for whatever diet or label, IFYM or flexible dieting. But you have somebody that has a completely different personality type and has a little bit of knowledge on what works for them. You can tailor it and tweak it
and automatically makes them more adherent. And I think that's what I love what your book is going to do. It's going to arm people with the knowledge on, yeah, actually, I think these are the kind of foods that might work well for me. I've used these in the past, or this is the kind of training system that my body responded to and I lost body fat faster. And then when you're working with your trainer or your online coach or your nutritionist or whoever it is, you can have that conversation with them and then you can blend it. And you end up getting this amazing program, this amazing nutritional strategy, and one you can adhere to long term, which is going to set you up for the success over a longer period of time, as opposed to do this for 6 weeks, eat your broccoli and chicken, do 8 to 10 reps, do your HIIT cardio at the end, and then forget about it in 6 weeks. I love that your book is going to nearly be that bridge between personal trainer, nutritionist, or anyone you're following or working with, and the actual person looking to get results.
I never thought about it like that. The bridge between the two. That is brilliant. I'm using that, Brian. I will quote you in it.
Take it. It's yours.
I've never thought about it like that, but that is brilliant. I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna write that down. Don't worry. I'll reference you, Brian.
It's all yours. Completely taken. I love it. I'm so excited. Is there anything else? Because we're going to run short on time now, and I want to tell people the best place to get it and everything else more about it. Is there a particular part of the book that's your favorite? Is there a section that you're in there and you're like, oh, I'm sure the entire thing, it's your baby and you're proud of everything. Is there anything in it that either you particularly love or anyone listening, as soon as they pick up the book, you're like, yeah, check this section out?
Yeah, I think the probably the endurance section, only because, again, there was a meta study done at Hull University, so a study of thousands of studies, and they were looking at the best way to train for endurance. And after so much research, they just concluded and was like, the scientific consensus is there's no best way to train for endurance. And when you start looking at, Paula Radcliffe, who, famously had awful biomechanics in her head was all over the place. You look at Emil Zatopek, one of the greatest endurance runners ever. He famously from a military background, so he was used to running in army boots. So his technique, a sports biomechanist would look at that and go, that is awful. Yet these were amazing endurance athletes. And I think everything within the endurance chapter I like so much because I say at the start, I am built like a hobbit and I am in no way do I have a genetic predisposition to be that good at endurance. So everything that has worked for me within this book will definitely work for you because I'm awful at it. So I think that was quite nice that, like most of the book, I hope there's so many epiphanies for people when they're reading it and they just kind of go, oh yeah, I never thought about it like that. And that's the thing that hopefully it's going to be a real catalyst within the industry to get people thinking differently and talking like me and you always do when we catch up. You can have that real exchange of ideas and why are you running the marathon of Southland? Like, Ross, why are you doing weird things with trees? And there's all
just to say, if I had €1 for every time someone commented on the last episode about what is your favorite thing that you spent €100 or £100 or less on. Do you remember what your answer was in the last podcast?
What was it? What did I say?
You said the fucking rope for the tree when you were doing the swim. I got quoted and tagged and DM'd more about that than any other fucking rapid fire question I've ever asked on the podcast. They were like, Ross Edgley, the legend, fucking rope.
It was a good rope.
That was it. You were like, oh, the rope was chafy, and so I bought some great rope. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Ross did the how many things have you done with the fucking tree or the trunk or with the fucking piece of wood that you run and swim and cycle with?
That's it. Yeah. So there was the triathlon, but I used the rope during the triathlon, carrying a tree to wrap it around my back. But then it was a similar rope that, it's such a good rope that I was using during the swim, which was 100 kilometers. And this is how good the rope was. I took on a training swim in the Caribbean. I did 10 kilometers and the wood snapped. So the actual log itself broke because there was 6 foot waves. So the log broke, but the rope was still strong. And then it was still strong. I've still got it to this day, the rope.
That's That's incredible. I'll never forget that bit, because just the amount of messages I got after that with like the laugh emoji on Instagram, and they're like, just rub, and the laugh emoji after the episode was incredible.
Amazing.
I
Legend.
love it. Ross, tell people this is going out on the 12th of May, and if I'm not mistaken, the book is officially out on the 11th of May. Am I right in saying that?
That's or the 10th. I can't remember which, but certainly 10th, 11th, 12th, around then. Yes.
Brilliant. So as you are listening to this on the 12th of May, you will be able to pick up the book. Tell people where's the best place to pick it up, Ross.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, so it's Amazon, WH Smith, and Waterstones, and then also as well, it will be available, in actual store as well. But, and I'll chat to you off air, but I want to do something in Ireland, and something has come up. So I will chat to you about that, because I'll probably hand deliver yours if I'm around there.
Oh, fuck, that's exciting.
But yeah, available from most places, but Amazon, certainly.
I love it. And I will be linking everything up in the show notes. I'll link the Amazon links up. If it's on Book Depository, which I'm sure it will be, they're linked in with Amazon as well. I know a lot of people in Ireland get books from Book Depository. It's where I normally recommend alongside Amazon. I'll put all those links. I'll link all the pages that you have, Ross, your Instagram, your website, the whole lot. And everybody listening, very rarely will I say if you need to pick up this book. I don't think I've ever said it on the podcast, because I think generally there's books that I'm like, I love the Happy Pears book, and I'm like, look, everyone that is into recipes and cooking, you got to pick up this book. And again, different ones, Food Medics, I love Hazel's book as well, for the same reason. Anybody that's into fitness, I think you should pick up this book. So if you're listening to this podcast, it is 100%. I haven't read it yet, but I've seen clips from the inside. I've seen bits and pieces. I know Ross personally. I know everything that he puts out is always of the most incredible value. I know some of the theories, the pyramid of prioritization, which I've talked about on the podcast. I always reference Ross anytime I use it. I can't recommend this enough. So if you're listening to this, as soon as this podcast is over, go check it out on Amazon. Check out the links that I put up, and 100% go and order this book.
Oh. Brian, you're such a legend. You are the biggest, henchest marathon desert running legend I know.
Man,
Not many. You might be the only one. I know.
I'm okay with that. Man, Ross, I cannot thank you enough. Can't wait to catch up. And thank you so much again for coming on.
Oh, Brian, thank you. Thank you, mate.